All right, so today we're going deep on a topic suggested by one of our listeners.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, but also kind of spooky.
No, I like spooky. Let's hear it.
It's called The Shadows That Follow, and it's not your typical ghost story. You know, like how some spirits are tied to a certain place.
Right, haunted houses and all that.
Exactly. Well, these shadows are different. They actually attach themselves to people.
To people, so they're not haunting a location, but a person.
That's the idea, and it makes them super hard to get rid of.
Wow. That's a whole different level of creepy.
Right. So to really understand what we're talking about, we're going to dig into the story of a listener named Jason.
You have a first-hand account.
I do. He reached out to us with his experience, and let me tell you, it's chilling.
I bet. And what makes these shadows different from just seeing, shadow people? I mean, people see those sometimes, right?
They do. But Jason's story and others we've come across suggest that there's something more to these shadows. They seem to affect people on a deeper level, like psychologically and even emotionally.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a visual thing.
Yeah.
There's a real impact.
Exactly. So let's start with Jason's encounter. He first noticed these shadows during a really tough time in his life. You know, when you're already feeling vulnerable and then you start seeing these dark shapes out of the corner of your eye.
Oh, man. I could only imagine.
It would be unsettling, to say the least.
For sure. There's actually a psychological phenomenon called the sense of presence, where people feel like someone's nearby, even when there's no one there.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
So even without seeing a shadow, that feeling itself could be really unnerving.
Absolutely. But for Jason, it went beyond just a feeling. He actually started seeing them. At first, it was just quick glimpses, but they became more and more persistent. They followed him everywhere.
And this is where it gets really different from a normal haunting, right? Because they followed him even when he moved.
You got it. He moved to different cities, even different countries, and they didn't go away.
So it's not about the place. It's about him.
Right. It's like they were attached to him specifically.
Wow, that's scary.
He described them as vaguely human-shaped, but with no features. Just dark silhouettes lurking in reflections at the edge of his vision.
Always watching.
Exactly. And it wasn't just seeing them either. He mentioned hearing soft whispers, too. Not clear words, but enough to make him question his sanity.
Like something was trying to communicate, but in a creepy way.
Right. It's like a constant psychological torment.
That would mess with your head.
It definitely would.
Mhm.
Now, Jason's story is scary enough, but it's not unique. We found another account from a woman in New York City who had a very similar experience.
Really. Another shadow that followed someone everywhere.
Yep. No matter where she moved, this shadow was there. This wasn't about a haunted apartment or anything. It was attached to her.
So this is definitely a pattern.
It seems to be. And it shows that these shadows are different from regular hauntings. They're mobile, persistent, and they seem to have a very specific interest in the people they target.
And you said earlier that it goes beyond the visual with these shadows. Like there are other effects.
Right. The visual aspect is creepy enough, but it seems like there's a deeper, more disturbing effect on people's lives, especially their mental and emotional well-being.
Okay, so we're going beyond a creepy sighting.
Yes.
This is getting into something much more intense.
Exactly. And that's what makes this phenomenon so fascinating and frightening. What is it about these shadows that gives them this kind of power over people? And what are they after?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? We're going to have to explore that more when we come back after the break.
Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking about these shadow figures that attach themselves to people.
Right, not to places,
To
people.
And they seem to have this power over people's mental and emotional state.
Yeah, it's a pretty disturbing aspect of this whole phenomenon.
So the big question is, what are these shadows?
Right. What's the explanation?
Whoa.
Well, there are a few theories out there, and one that gets mentioned a lot is the idea of psychic vampires.
Psychic vampires. That
Yeah.
sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the basic idea is that these entities, they don't feed on blood or anything like that, but on emotional energy.
Emotional energy.
Yeah, particularly negative emotions like fear, sadness, anxiety, things like that.
So are you saying they're drawn to those negative feelings?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Like those emotions make a person more vulnerable to their influence.
So it's not just random. They're targeting people who are already struggling.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And the term psychic vampire actually has a long history. It goes back to occultism and ideas about beings that drain life force from others.
Wow. So this isn't just some new age idea.
Not at all.
Oh.
There's a lot of folklore and mythology about these kinds of creatures.
That's interesting. So you have these psychic vampires, but then there's also the theory that these shadows are interdimensional beings.
Right, that's another possibility.
Yeah.
Some people believe that these shadows are actually entities from another dimension.
Like another reality.
Yeah, like a parallel universe or something. And they're somehow slipping through cracks in our reality and showing up here.
Okay, but if there are all these other dimensions out there, what would make them come to ours? And why would they attach themselves to specific people?
One theory is that strong emotions, especially negative ones, can create a kind of disturbance or opening that allows these beings to cross over.
So it's almost like our emotions are acting like a beacon attracting them to us.
That's one way to think about it.
Yeah,
And it's interesting because whether it's psychic vampires or interdimensional beings, the common denominator seems to be this connection to our emotions.
especially negative emotions.
Right. It's like they feed on that negativity or they're drawn to it in some way.
Which makes you wonder, could we somehow use that knowledge to protect ourselves? Like if we could learn to control our emotions, maybe we could make ourselves less of a target.
That's a really intriguing idea. It's like if they're attracted to negativity, maybe we can repel them with positivity.
But that's going to be hard to do, right? I mean, if you're already feeling scared and anxious, how do you just switch that off?
You're absolutely right. It's not easy, but it's definitely something to think about. And it also raises another question. Why are these shadows so hard to get rid of?
We talked about how moving doesn't work because they're attached to the person, not the place.
Right. But what about other things like exorcisms or spiritual cleansings? Do those have any effect?
Some people have said they get temporary relief from those methods, but a lot of times the shadows come back.
It's like the connection is just too strong to break.
So even those traditional approaches to dealing with the paranormal, they don't offer a guaranteed solution.
That's what makes this phenomenon so unique and so unsettling. It's like we're dealing with something that we don't fully understand and we don't have the tools to deal with it effectively.
So what can people do if they find themselves targeted by these shadows?
Yeah.
Are there any ways to cope or to protect themselves?
Well, there are a few things that people have tried with some success. One approach is to use what are called grounding rituals.
Grounding rituals, what are those?
They're practices that are meant to center your energy and strengthen your connection to the earth. It's like creating a protective shield around yourself.
So you're basically trying to make yourself less vulnerable to outside influences.
Exactly. Whether it's negative energy or unwanted spirits or even these shadows.
That makes sense. So what are some examples of these grounding rituals?
There are a lot of different practices, but some common ones include things like smudging with sage to clear out negative energy.
Oh, yeah. Heard of that.
And then there's placing salt around your home to create a barrier, or even carrying certain crystals that are thought to repel negativity.
Like black tourmaline.
Exactly. Black tourmaline is a popular one. But there are others too, like obsidian or amethyst. It really depends on what resonates with you.
So it's about finding what feels right for you personally.
Exactly. But aside from those rituals, there's also the idea that we can work on strengthening our own emotional well-being.
So it's not just about external protection, it's about internal strength as well.
Right. It's like building up your mental and emotional immune system.
Because if you're stronger on the inside, you're less likely to be affected by these negative forces.
That's the idea. But it's not easy. It takes a lot of work and dedication.
Especially when you're dealing with something as creepy and persistent as these shadows.
Exactly. It's a constant battle.
Yeah.
But there are things that can help, like meditation, mindfulness, practices, therapy, anything that helps you manage stress and build resilience.
So it's a holistic approach. You're working on yourself on all levels.
Right, because ultimately the goal is to become less attractive to these shadows, to make yourself less of a target.
That's a powerful idea. But it also makes you realize how serious this phenomenon is.
It is serious, and it's something that we need to take seriously. We need to keep researching it and sharing our experiences so we can learn more about it and hopefully find more effective ways to deal with it.
Because right now it seems like we're just scratching the surface of something that's much bigger than we realize.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that there's still so much that we don't know about the world and the forces that might be at play around us.
Oh. And that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating and so terrifying at the same time.
It's the unknown that scares us the most, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what keeps us coming back for more, trying to understand the mysteries of the universe and our place in it.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, haven't we? And we've talked about potential explanations and things people have tried, but it seems like there are still a lot of unanswered questions about these shadows.
That's the nature of the paranormal, I guess. It doesn't always fit neatly into our understanding of the world. But even without concrete answers, I think it's important to talk about these experiences and try to make sense of them.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that keeps coming up is a connection between these shadows and negative emotions. Like they're somehow drawn to that energy.
Right. It's almost as if they feed on it or are attracted to it in some way.
So could we use that knowledge to our advantage? Like, if we could learn to control our emotions, maybe we could make ourselves less vulnerable.
That's a really interesting thought. It's like if we can shift our own energy to a more positive state, maybe we can make ourselves less appealing to these shadows.
So it's about changing our own frequency, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that positive thinking alone is going to solve the problem, but it could be a part of the solution.
It's like strengthening our mental and emotional immune system.
Right. If we're stronger on the inside, we might be more resistant to those negative influences.
So what are some ways to build that inner strength?
Well, we've talked about meditation and mindfulness, but it can also be about finding things that bring you joy.
Like spending time with loved ones or being in nature?
Exactly. Things that nourish your soul and help you connect with your inner light.
It's about finding what works for you and making it a part of your life.
And remember, even if you've had an encounter with these shadows, you're not alone. There are others who have been through similar things.
And there are resources available to help you cope.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to reach out for support, whether it's from friends, family, or professionals.
That's so important. And it also highlights the importance of sharing these stories.
Right, because when we talk about these things, it helps to break the taboo, and it
Yeah.
can also lead to greater understanding and maybe even solutions.
So by shining a light on this phenomenon, maybe we can find better ways to deal with it.
Exactly. And maybe even find a way to break free from these shadows completely.
It's a goal worth striving for.
It is. And in the meantime, we can focus on strengthening our own inner light and supporting each other.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive. It's been a fascinating and unsettling journey, but hopefully it's left us with a sense of hope and empowerment.
Right. Even though we've been talking about shadows, we've also been talking about the power of our own inner light.
And that's a message worth remembering.
It is.
Yeah.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep sharing your experiences. Because that's how we learn and grow.
Thanks for joining us. And until next time, stay curious, stay open-minded, and stay strong.